Soon after Emperor Qin's death, the people who had suffered under his rule rebelled and revolted. They assassinated his son and founded the Han Dynasty, starting in 206 BCE. The Han Dynasty ruled for 4 centuries, and they built on Qin's reforms in a more liberal governing policy. They also extended China's western and southern boundaries. They even traded with people far and wide, including Rome, via the Silk Road. In 1972, there was an important discovery of the Han Dynasty. While extracting the tomb of the Marquis Dai at the Mangwangdui in China's Hunan province, archaeologists found goods buried with the Lady Dai, including lacquer utensils, textiles, and a funeral banner made of silk that was draped over her banner, over her coffin. And this is an extraordinary discovery because this is a textile painted that is thousands of years old. Given the delicacy of silk, it's really extraordinary that this has survived for so long. But you'll see it was lodged between several coffins that can account for some of the state of preservation. Silk is made through a complicated process in which farmers breed silkworms and place the eggs on trays, and they must feed them with mulberry trees, which is their only food source. When they're in a cocoon, they must kill them with steam or heat before they emerge into moths and destroy the silk. This is extremely labor intensive. It takes about 5 to 10 cocoons to make 1 strand of silk, which must be unwoven by hand. So given the extraordinary amount of labor that goes into creating the silk fiber, this material is highly coveted and very valuable, and it becomes the made good of the Silk Road. 3 elite tombs were found at Mangwangdui in the Hunan province in eastern China. They belonged to a high-ranking Han civil servant, the Marquis of Dai, also his wife, Lady Dai, and their son. The Marquis died in 186 BCE, and his wife and son both died by 163 BCE. The Marquis' tomb was not in good condition when it was discovered. However, the objects in the son's and wife's tombs were of good quality and very well preserved. Here we are looking at the nesting coffins of Lady Dai. Inside the smallest one was preserved mummified remains of Lady Dai herself. And a funeral banner, the silk painted funeral banner, was found lodged in between these. We can divide this funeral banner into 4 distinct horizontal registers, which you can see in this diagram. In the lower central register, we see Lady Dai herself with her attendants, and she's standing on a white platform here. You can get a better view of her in this detail. She is wearing a silk embroidered cloak and leaning on a cane. She has 2 attendants in front of her and 3 in back. And this is really remarkable because it is the earliest known example of a painted portrait of a specific individual in China. Here is a detail in which you can see Lady D and her attendants in the context of the imagery around her on the funeral banner. And you see that she's framed on either side by these long, sinuous dragons whose bodies loop around her and below through a bee. And here you can see that bee here. Remember the flattened jade discs that were found in Neolithic China that were found in funeral contexts. They are thought to represent the sky. And so here is a representation of one of those discs. We understand that this is not a portrait of Lady Di in her former life, but rather an image of her enjoying immortality, enjoying the comforts of her tomb as she ascends towards the heavens. Another remarkable thing about this funeral banner is that we can learn a lot about funerary practices from it. In the register below the scene of Lady Di, we see sacrificial funerary rituals taking place in a mourning hall. Tripod containers, and you see them here, these containers, and vase-shaped vessels for offering food and wine stand in the foreground, and they're kind of almost on a platform shelf like Lady Di was. In the middle ground, we see mourners line up in 2 rows, and here they are here, these figures that are kind of in overlapping spaces, planes in the middle ground. If you look closely, you can see patterns on the silk robe that match the one that Lady Di is wearing in the scene. So here we can see that the palette, the ivory, red, and brown, all kind of match the ornamentation, the decoration woven into her robe. It's almost as though she is wearing the funeral banner that she is that covers her coffin. Mourning scene, we can also see how Chinese painters of this time were trying to represent space and depth. All of these figures are kind of stacked in a space that is recessing into some depth behind here, and the objects are, again, one is placed into another to give us the sense of space. The banner also gives us some insight into the beliefs and funerary practices of the Han Dynasty China. Above and below the scenes of Lady Di in the mourning hall, we see images of heaven and the underworld. Towards the top of the banner, near the cross section of the T, we see 2 men here facing one another, and they guard the gate to the heavenly realm. And directly above those 2 men, at the very top of the banner, we see a deity with a human head and a dragon body up here. On the left, we see a toad sitting on a crescent-shaped moon, and on the right, a crow within a pink circle, which might be a sun. The moon and the sun are emblematic of a supernatural realm above the human world. Dragons and other immortal beings populate the sky. Below Lady Di and her attendants, we see her in her coffin with mourners below, and beneath that we see the underworld, which is populated by 2 giant black fish, a red snake, a pair of blue goats, and an unidentified earthly deity. The deity seems to be holding up the floor of the mourning hall, while the two fish cross to form a circle beneath them that almost echoes the shape of the bee here. The beings in the underworld symbolize water and the earth, and they show an underground domain that is below the human world.